In this section, let's look at inputs. So inputs are pretty simple but pretty powerful concept of PineScript. So idea is that you can create a set of parameters, and after that you can use these parameters to modify behavior of your indicator or strategy without actually modifying the code. So let's look how it works. So here I've already created like a super small script and I added it to my chart. And after that, if you click this gear button close to your indicator name, you can open your settings of your indicator, and here on the first tab, inputs, you will find all your inputs. So here I created here like 2 integer inputs, and I can basically change my inputs from here, and you can see that my indicator will recompute itself like basically live. So it's quite useful. And here I created 2 inputs with, and I used 2 different types of functions just to explain you like a small concept that like you have basically can create input kind of 2 ways in PineScript version 5, just with input function, and basically just list your like default value here, and PineScript then will try to understand based on your default value what is the type of your input. And also you can use explicitly input.int, basically input dot and type of your input. And I believe that it's much better way to use this way, like input.int for example, because in these functions you have much more very interesting parameters. You can do much more things. So basically, if you want to use inputs in version 5 of PineScript, use these functions. After you created an input, you can use it as your usual variable basically. And here, for example, I use it as length in my simple moving average indicator, and after I compute my moving average and I just plot it. So as you can see, it's quite simple. Now let's look at other types of inputs in PineScript. There is actually quite a lot of them. Let's check them all. So here I created like a small script with all types of inputs, and let's go through all of them just to understand how they work. So first is input.int input, and this is just integer input. I already showed you in my previous script. And actually you can also basically set up additional kind of values for your input. Basically you can set up what will be your minimal value, max value, and the step. And basically here, if you look at inputs themselves, for example, if I'll try to put here like a 0, actually I cannot do that. It doesn't let me do like 101. It also won't allow me to do that as well. As you can see, it's pretty powerful in terms of limitations. And if I will click these buttons up and down, it will increase by 1 basically, because my step is 1. Second option for you to create your inputs, inputs is actually provide PineScript with just an options. So you can basically forbid to use any values except the ones you provided. So here basically you can see with this stuff, with these options parameters, I created like this drop down, and here you can just select one of my 5 arguments I listed in my option parameter. So second types is input.float, and here everything is the same as input.int. So idea is completely the same. You can do this with minval, so basically you can set up your minimal value, maximum value, and the step. And now if I will increase my float input, you will see that actually it's increased by just basically 0.5. And also I can also specify the same options for float as well. And here you can see I have like 5 different options for float, and I cannot select other arguments basically. Quite similar is string input. So you can create it with the input.string. Basically you can pass some like text here. So with the usual one without any options, you can see you just can type here any text you want, and this will basically pass this to your indicator. And second argument, you can also add options, variable with like a list of acceptable options in square brackets, and this way you will create this drop down and user can choose only one of these arguments for strings as well. So it can be quite useful for a selection of different types of computations. So for example, here I select how I compute my moving average. I can just choose one of the methods only. So next is bool input. So bool input is the simplest one. So basically you can create choose like, do you want to be true or false, and this will create this checkbox with, you know, like your bool value. And if checkbox is checked, then this is a true. If checkbox is not checked, this will pass a false value to your script. So next type of inputs are color inputs. So you can create the input.color, and here you can use color as like one of the built-in colors as a default value, or you can use just like RGB format of your color. And this will create you a really nice palette, basically, where you can go through your all like colors available to you, or you can go and create like a custom one. You can even paste here just custom RGB format, and this will add this to you. And also you can select here opacity of your color as well. So it's quite powerful if you want to create really a nice looking indicator. And next input is input.price. So it looks a bit similar to what you have in your like float input, but it actually has a feature that I will show you in one of the next videos, that actually it's quite a very powerful input as well. So next look at source input. So source input, you can create it with the input.source, and you can choose a source of for your indicator here. And by default here you have like 7 different values you can choose from. So open, high, low, close, average of high, low, average of high, low, close, and average of open, high, low, close. So it's quite simple, but for some indicators it might be pretty useful. Next input I use quite a lot in my scripts is symbol input. This is the input you can use to choose different symbols. So as you know, probably in PineScript you can create indicators based on many symbols, up to 40 symbols you can use. So you can also put the symbols in your inputs and just basically change them from your inputs without changing the code as well. So you can click here, and here you will see the same kind of change symbol dialog you see when you select your symbol for your main chart. So it's quite powerful. Also in PineScript you can use different time frames for your indicator. You can use multiple time frames as well. So you can select like an input with resolution, and there is 2 ways to create resolution input. One is just without any options, and this will create you an input that looks absolutely the same as your selection of your resolution for your main chart. But also you can restrict using only certain resolutions here, and the second resolution here I have only has 3 options I listed in my option parameters for this input. So next input is input.time, and with this input you can quite easily select date and time in your indicators. It can be useful for you if, for example, you want to backtest your strategy only from certain period and not for entire history. And it will create you a very nice input where you can select like a date separately, and also you can select time as well if you're working with intraday data. And as you can see here, you have to, if you want to list like a default value, you have to use like a timestamp function in a similar format to pass your default value in to this function. Now we will speak about time functions a bit later in this course, but as you can see here, you can quite easily create this kind of inputs. So next look at input.session, and you also have like 2 ways of creating this session. So first one, you can just list your session. You can like put input.session function and just type your session in the following format. So basically you put here your hours and minutes of your session, beginning of session and end of the session, and you separate this by dash, and this is kind of your default value. And PineScript will understand this very nicely for you and will create you nice two inputs that will represent your session, and you can click on it. It will be drop downs when you can select beginning and end of your session. And also for the session you also can select like option parameters for your inputs, and this will restrict to use only certain sessions, and you can just click on this drop down and select one of the sessions, and basically it works very similar to how string works when you select options for input sessions. So I think that's it about all the types of inputs available in PineScript. In the next few videos we will explore some interesting use cases, some interesting features of certain inputs.